Well, hello again everyone. I am back once again to review not one, but two Godzilla figures. Said figures being the Hiya Toys and Sh Monster Arts Godzilla 2000. First we'll go over the Sh Monster Arts figure, then talk about the Hiya figure, and finish off the video with a comparison between the two. So without further ado, let's get started. Now the first thing that needs to be mentioned is that Sh Monster Arts definitely improved the accuracy of the figure since the first Godzilla 2000 figure. Not to say that first figure was bad, as it still looks really cool from what I've seen of it online, but the sculpt is more trying to recreate a concept for Godzilla 2000 and not the official design from the movie, so it's nice to see a fresh take on the design. The overall sculpt and details are really well done, although not completely one-to-one with the movie, which doesn't seem obvious on the first glance, as I myself thought it looked very accurate to Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. But after comparing him to the suit in the movie, it becomes very apparent that it's not the most accurate, and ends up looking a little bit like Kermit the Frog, which is kind of disappointing. But I also know that not everybody has a problem with the stylized look that Sh Monster Arts has with some of their figures, so if you like it, that's fine. Moving on, the paint on the dorsals are done pretty well and look very nice, although I would have liked the paint to have been more metallic, but that's just me. Painting on the eyes, mouth, claws, and nails all look very nice, with a nice glossy finish to make them pop against the rest of the figure. And that's it for the paint. No, I'm not joking. That is literally all the paint on the figure. Not to say that's a completely awful thing, less paint on a figure usually means you can play more without a lot of paint chipping off. But at the price you're paying for this, you'd think there would at least be some kind of wash or dry brush to bring out the details more. It still can depending on the lighting, but that's also a double-edged sword because the sculpt can also look flat and blend in together a lot as well. I know a majority of people who own this figure don't really mind that, and I can still see why, because despite looking plasticky at times, it still looks really cool, and this figure did give me more appreciation for this particular design of Godzilla. So far the figure's looks are just okay, but the looks aren't what this figure is known for. And now's a perfect time as any to take a look at what this figure is known for, that being the articulation.
The very thought of you feels like fantasy. Close my eyes, you remain close to me. When you're in my arms, my sorrow disappears. Truth I know is what you wanna hear. You'll find I'm glad to say that love has dispersed from my mind through my soul to my heart. It is very clear I'll always need you here, ember of a fire that'll start. And the summer days, they will fade away, ever in my memory. No empty space since you claimed your place with me.
As you can see, the figure has some really great articulation, including some cool extending joints throughout the body which allow the figure to hit much more dynamic poses than the average Sh Monster Arts figure, especially with that amazing tail. Despite this, the articulation isn't as amazing, groundbreaking, or revolutionary as some people have described. Starting at the neck, its articulation helps the figure look down a good amount, but his side-to-side articulation isn't really that good. You could utilize the previously mentioned extending joints in the neck, but even then it doesn't particularly do much and looks bad from other angles. Moving down to the abdomen, the crunch is pretty good thanks to those extending joints, but honestly it's not the best as older figures can match it or even exceed it, but it can get you a good 360 rotation, which is pretty cool. Next thing is more of a minor nitpick for me, but the sculpt at the base of the tail doesn't look good. The space between the last dorsal plate on the body and the first center one on the tail makes it look like another spine should be there, even though there isn't supposed to be one. And then that empty space gets even worse when you want to do certain poses with the tail, making the space much more obvious and annoying to look at least to me. These things don't make the figure terrible, but they do keep him from being one of the best Godzilla figures out there. As for accessories, there are none. Great. Anyways, time for some size comparisons. Here's the figure next to the Sh Monster Arts Godzilla 1954 and Sh Monster Arts Gamera. Here's the figure next to the Hiya Toys Godzilla Evolved and Hiya Toys Godzilla 1991. Here's the figure next to the Sh Monster Arts Godzilla Evolved and the Sh Monster Arts Godzilla 1991. And lastly, here's the figure next to the Nanmu Spinosaurus and Figma Weiss Schnee. This figure is definitely not a masterpiece, but it's still incredibly fun to play with and a pretty great figure overall. But I wouldn't say it's worth the $130 it costs. I know a lot of people still like this figure and don't mind the issues or the price, which is completely fine, but I personally don't agree with them. Alright, time to move on to the next figure in the review, the Hiya Toys Godzilla 2000. I remember when I first saw Hiya's preview video on this figure and thinking it kinda just looked like an articulated Bandai vinyl figure, but after getting it here in person, I gotta say it's much better looking in person. For starters, it looks super accurate to the movie, which is refreshing to see after the goofy looking Sh Monster Arts figure, especially the more ferocious looking head sculpt. Aside from accuracy, the figure looks really good, but it does have its issues. The main problem areas being the upper body sculpt being too soft in the stomach area, and then the thighs having this nice rough texture that isn't present anywhere else on the body. Does this ruin the figure? No, I wouldn't say so, unless you're ultra focused on Godzilla's thighs all the time, and honestly, who could blame you? Aside from those areas, the sculpt is still amazing and has some really great detailing. Moving on to the paint, I will admit it does look pretty basic at a glance, but as you guys will see, there is more to this paint job than meets the eye. First off, the spines are immaculate looking with that beautiful metallic paint which I was craving ever since I got the Sh Monster Arts figure, especially since the brighter colors make the figure pop more. The eyes, mouth, claws, and nails are also well painted and look very nice, and while the rest of the figure's body seems unpainted, there is actually a nice brown wash throughout the cracks and crevices of the figure that make the details stand out nicely. The only problem with the paint I have is just that the paint on the spines doesn't go all the way to the end of the tail, which is a shame because it would make this figure so much better. Other than that, this figure has a really good paint job. Alright, with the paint and sculpt out of the way, it's time to see the articulation.
The very thought of you feels like fantasy. Close my eyes, you remain close to me. When you're in my arms, my sorrow disappears. Truth I know is what you wanna hear. You'll find I'm glad to say that love has dispersed from my mind through my soul to my heart. It is very clear I'll always need you here, ember of a fire that'll start. And the summer days, they will fade away, ever in my memory. No empty space since you claimed your place with me.
This figure definitely doesn't have as much articulation as the MonsterArts figure, but that doesn't make the figure feel limited at all, as a lot of those poses feel really natural and easy to get him into, and he looks good at pretty much any angle you get him in, which is a feeling I can't really get with the Sh Monster Arts Godzilla 2000. This figure also comes with accessories, that being an alternate pair of hands that look like they're for grabbing stuff, as opposed to the more splayed out clawing hands. With how good this figure looks, you'd think it would be at least $100 or something, but for the figure and its second pair of hands it costs a clean $51.99, which makes you feel like you're getting what you pay for. Real quick, let's get another size comparison done. Here's the figure next to the Sh Monster Arts Godzilla 1954 and Sh Monster Arts Gamera. Here's the figure next to the Hiya Toys Godzilla Evolved and Hiya Toys Godzilla 1991. Here's the figure next to the Sh Monster Arts Godzilla Evolved and Sh Monster Arts Godzilla 1991. Here's the figure next to the Figma Weiss Schnee and the Nanmu Spinosaurus. And lastly, here's the figure next to the Sh Monster Arts Godzilla 2000. Now I think it's been clear that I've been sending some not too subtle shots towards Sh Monster Arts, so now I think is the perfect time to move on to the comparison between these two figures. This is the first time I'm comparing two figures together like this, so I figured the way this will work is by going by certain categories to see which figure did better. The categories we'll be going by are accuracy, paint, how the figure feels, and cost. Starting off with accuracy, the MonsterArts figure does a much better job at being accurate to the movie it's from compared to the first Godzilla 2000 figure they made, as I said before. But unfortunately, he's not as accurate as he could be, and not in a good way. The head sculpt looks a little scrunched up compared to the suit, and also doesn't look as mean as he should. Again, looking more like Kermit the Frog. The arms also look a little too long compared to the movie, but other than that, the rest of the sculpt looks fine and is pretty good overall. Looking at the Hiya figure, and it looks as close to one-to-one with the suit as Godzilla figures go. From the paint to sculpt to the proportions, this figure captures the look Godzilla has in the movie much better than the SH MonsterArts does. Moving on to paint, both figures do pretty well here, however they both have their issues as well. As I mentioned before, the Hiya figure's spine paint doesn't go all the way down to the end of the tail, and the MonsterArts figure has zero paint on the main body other than the areas I mentioned during his segment. However, I'm more inclined to give this point to Hiya because it does have that nice brown wash to give the figure's details more depth, but also the MonsterArts figure has some issues with its paint. The first issue is relatively common across many MonsterArts releases, and that is the eyes not looking straight forward. But the second issue is that for some reason the upper teeth and lower teeth are painted differently. No, it's not just a trick of the lighting, they are actually painted differently, the upper teeth being more yellow and the lower teeth being a lighter yellow. This is not just an issue with my figure, as a fellow YouTuber known as Sharktopus Von Jr. also has this problem. I checked some other reviews and at first I thought this was only an issue with me and Sharktopus's figure, but after some more checking, I think it was more just the lighting of those first couple of reviews I looked at, as I found this problem in other copies as well. Not saying the teeth aren't painted nicely, but for $130, shouldn't we get a consistent paint job? With all that being said, I think it's very clear why Hiya takes this category as well. The next category is how the figure feels. Starting out with Hiya, the figure feels very solid and good to handle. The only joint that feels slightly loose is the torso, but even then it can still hold whatever position you put it in. Moving over to the MonsterArts figure, and this figure is pretty solid too and holds its positions very well. However, the elbow on my copy has loosened up over the time I've owned it and can fall down at the slightest touch. The same thing started happening with the segment of the tail, but I managed to tighten the joint again with some super glue. Honestly, this is probably the closest of the categories, and I would tie them, but I think I'm going to have to give the slight edge to Hiya here, as my figure hasn't loosened up at all, versus the MonsterArts, which has. Finally, we get to the cost. For $130, you get the SH MonsterArts figure and nothing else. And for $51, you can get the Hiya figure as well as an extra pair of hands. I think it's very clear why the Hiya figure wins this category, because I think a majority of people, including myself, actually want to get some value out of the figure they're spending money on. How come the $130 figure has mediocre paint with a multitude of issues with its paint and the quality of the figure overall, while the $51 figure is more accurate, has better paint, and comes with accessories? For $130, you'd think you should get some buildings or a beam, but you get nothing. If this is what a premium collectible looks like, then my cat looks like a tiger. Just to put that price into perspective, for $24 more you can get the Mezco 1954 figure, and it comes with buildings, a giant beam accessory, multiple hands, a train, tanks, cannons, and the figure itself is made of a rubber material with a metal endoskeleton inside it. And the SH MonsterArts Godzilla 2000 figure is only $20 less and you get absolutely nothing. For obvious reasons, the Hiya figure wins the final category and this comparison as a whole. Now, I'm sure some people will probably think I was glazing Hiya the whole time and just trashing the MonsterArts figure for the sake of hating or whatever, but in all honesty, that's not the case. I wish this figure was as great as people make it out to be. I really do, because despite its flaws, I still think it's a really cool and fun figure, but it's certainly not the best Godzilla figure out there and definitely not worth its price. That doesn't mean you should toss your copies in the garbage, of course. If you disagree or don't mind the issues this figure has, then I'm happy for all of you that enjoy the figure more than me. At the end of the day, I can only tell you the facts about these figures and show you their ups and downs and let you decide what figure you want from there. However, as far as I can tell, the figure that's definitely the definitive Godzilla 2000 figure here today is the Hiya Toys Godzilla 2000. Thank you for watching this video to the end, guys. If you liked it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and also share this video with your friends to help the channel grow. I'm much more active in my community tab, so if you want to chat with me or other people about figures, fights, or other topics, maybe head on over there. Plus, whenever I'm making a new video, you'll be able to see updates from there. That being said, that's all I got for today's video. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next one.